Welcome to the Swim Swam podcast. I'm today's host, Coleman Hodges. Joining us today, we have Dr. Christoph Bartneck. He is a professor of computer science and a competitive swimmer with several national records. He actively promotes masters paraswimming in his role as national paraswimming coordinator. He's an experienced science communicator with an interest in the intersection of mathematics, engineering, and psychology. Frequently gives public talks and lectures at the local, national, and international level. Dr. Bartneck is an accomplished author with hundreds of scientific articles and books to his name. His work has been featured in The New Scientist, Scientific American, Popular Science, Wired, The New York Times, The Times, BBC, Huffington Post, Washington Post, The Guardian, and The Economist. So with us here today to talk to us about his new book, Swim Training Patterns, Dr. Christoph Bartneck. This episode of the Swim Swam podcast is sponsored by Commit Swimming, SwimSwam's exclusive team management software partner. Since 2015, Commit has been providing coaches with swimming's leading workout management software. And now, Commit has team management software too. Commit wants to help you make the switch from Team Unify to a simpler, more powerful solution. Their onboarding and customer service team will walk you through every step of the way. Check them out at commitswimming.com to book your demo today. That's COMMIT swimming.com. Christoph, thanks so much for joining us. How's it going?
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. You sent me over a copy of this book. I was very intrigued and excited to just take a look at it. And I'm excited to sit down and discuss this with you today because you, like the intro said, you have this intersection of math, science, and swimming. And I think we're seeing more and more of this kind of creep into swimming. I think in many ways, swimming is very antiquated. It is an old sport. It likes to stick to what it knows. But I think specifically over the last decade, we've seen math and science creep in. I just got to last month go shoot with Dr. Ken Ono, who's also pretty prestigious mathematician who has made his way into swimming, and we can already kind of see the impacts of that on the international level. And so I was excited to get your email as again, someone else who is thinking and looking at the sport in a different way. So first off, I'm just curious, what is your swim background? Obviously, you're a swimmer yourself, but how did you get interested in swimming, and what has kept you interested in swimming?
Well, I'm not necessarily a junior swimmer anymore. So starting off, I was swimming as a kid, a teenager, mainly because I was pretty bad at any other sport.
And where was that, by the way?
Sorry?
Where were you swimming?
Well, I grew up in Germany, but that's like many years ago, and I left Germany many years ago. So it's not my home anymore. I'm now in New Zealand, so I'm becoming a New Zealander, for better or worse. But yeah, swimming has always been a part of my life. I've swum since I was a kid, and I continued doing it. And of course, during my middle ages, when I was busy with the career and family and everything, got a bit less. But as you get older, you kind of get back into it, really. And I started competitive swimming again as a master swimmer. And at some point, I discovered that there isn't much for master para swimmers at all. And so I've been pushing very hard to make that possible, to allow people with a disability to compete at a master's level. Because at that point, I was forced to compete in the open classification. So again, I had to compete against 14-year-olds. And of course, I didn't stand a chance, but that was fine. And, a good part of getting older is it's not so serious anymore. So, we try to enjoy swimming a bit more, I suppose. But yeah, swimming has always been very important to me. It's my sport. I spend far too many hours in the water, and that makes you really think about the sport and how we can improve it.
Yeah. So what are your events of focus? Do you consider yourself a sprinter, a distance swimmer?
I never learned how to be fast. I only ever learned how to be stubborn. So for me, it's long distance. And I'm going to swim in the World Masters in Singapore in August, and well, I just go for the long distances. But I also enjoy. We're in New Zealand here, so we've got absolute fantastic open water swimming. So I also compete 10 kilometers. There's now a new one up in North Island next year, about 25 kilometers. I'm contemplating. But yeah, swimming in the ocean is wonderful. Swimming long distance, that's more my thing. Sprinting, yeah, it's no fun. It's like after a few seconds, everything's over. What's the point of that?
You're a distance swimmer, which makes sense to me because this book, Swim Training Patterns, is all about how to optimize what we might think of as classical swim training. So as you mentioned, you have a lot of time to think about swimming, think about training. And again, you are a doctor, you study math and science. So what are the problems that you present in this book that you found with swim training, and how do you go about? Well, let's start there. What are the problems that you present in this book, and how did you kind of formulate? Okay, this is what I want to tackle in this.
There's actually several problems that I'm trying to solve. The first one is that if you spend hours and hours in the pool, it is pretty boring. Like swimming up and down the lane, that's not the most fascinating thing to do. If you are like cycling or jogging, then you at least get to see the environment and changing seasons, or you take different paths, or there's a lot of things to look at. Whereas swimming, you stare at tiles day in, day out. That is not very interesting. And now where the problem is like, okay, where do you get inspiration from? Like, how can you know like something interesting to swim? And of course, we turn to the internet, but there's no real communication platform or communication standard. I mean, you can Google like, oh, interesting swimming programs, and you get some information about it, but there's no standard of communicating it. So if I share my swimming training programs, I might actually even use descriptions, abbreviations, or certain techniques or drills that you might not be familiar with. And so it's very hard to talk about something when you don't have a shared language. So the first step was to indeed establish a language that is formalized so that you know exactly what is meant by what term. The next thing is to make it computer readable. So we need computers to be able to understand swim training programs for several reasons. One is that so we can find it. So Google relies on crawling the internet, and if Google doesn't understand what is on a web page, it cannot really process and you can't search it. But also computers, of course, in competitive swimming are becoming more and more important because you want to keep track of what actually swimmers swim, and you also want to plan precisely what their workout is going to be. And for that, we have to move away from just drawing things on a whiteboard or keeping a notebook or putting things into Microsoft Word. That is not a way of documenting and scientifically really keeping track and being precise about what the swimmers are doing. Now, we do have, of course, got smart devices that keep track of what you do, but it's only after the fact. So you can record your exercise that you did, but it doesn't really do much in terms of planning ahead. Now, these days, there are some platforms that show you some instructions like what to do next, but again, the communication between these platforms is really a problem. You cannot just create your own program and put it on your watch and off you go. That's still quite hard to do. Or if, let's say, you commit to a certain app or a certain program, then taking that data and putting it somewhere else to be able to analyze it or to share it or do something like this is also still, there's no communication platforms. In the other areas like cycling, that's different because there are platforms and standards to communicate routes and waypoints very much with GPS, and you can have heart rate monitor linked up to it. So they're a bit further along those lines. So that's the kind of a technical solution. But then coming back to the problem of things being boring, yes, if you swim 100 times 100 meters, that is not very exciting thing to do. And so we come up by ourselves almost with all kind of variations and loops and repetitions to make it more interesting, just to give your mind something to do so that you have something in your mind you can actually engage in the training. And that's very important. And this is where we just need something interesting to do, something for the mind. So the book tries to present several patterns, interesting patterns that are founded where these ideas are kind of mathematical or from computer science. And they give you something to think about while you swim it, and therefore it becomes more interesting. And you not only train your body, but you also try to train your mind and have something interesting to think about.
Yeah. So can you tell me, or maybe give me an example of how this has worked for you, or how you've put this into play and found success with it?
Well, I'm not quite sure if I'm a success story. That's very debatable. But I mean, I swim. I won the national championship this year in my age group, and I'm going to the world champs. So yeah, I'm doing okay. But of course, at my level, and my age, it's different from what you would expect at the juniors or at the open level. So if you want to be the absolute fastest person on the planet, then it's still quite a different challenge. But nevertheless, again, when I was young, I was doing high performance swimming, and we spent several sessions a day in the pool, and there's only so much variation you can get out of it, and it just gets really boring. And staying committed to it is just a challenge. And so, so this is very useful for high performance swimming and competitive swimming. Of course, it is. But I also would argue it's interesting from a more casual swimming thing, because again, every day you go to the pool, you have to ask yourself the question, well, what am I going to swim today? And of course, if you're lucky and you've got an organized swimming club, there might be a coach that will tell you something that's great. But what if you don't? What if you're, let's say, your work schedule doesn't allow you and you have to go by yourself? What do you do? Or you maybe have got some mates that you can go with, but then still, what are you going to do? Somebody has to come up with a program, right? So having ideas on what you can swim, something interesting, that is something that I hope I'll be able to make a contribution.
Yeah. So can you dive in a little and just tell us about I mean, if you look in the book, I think for maybe a normal person who's interested in swimming, it's pretty cerebral. There is a lot of math. There is a lot of science. So I'm curious if you can dumb it down a little bit for us and but still take us through this process of how you're trying to make swim training a little more engaging, or what you found that might help do that.
Well, that's an interesting question, because that's a good test case. So I've given the book to some of my colleagues and swim mates, and they read it. And I would argue that anybody could read the book and understand it. The math in it is high school level. Nobody's going to win a Nobel Prize with this. It is really high school level. So in that sense, if you got a basic understanding of math, this will be perfectly fine. And I would also argue that the stories I tell about the math, because it's not just the formulas, it's also the story about these patterns. How does this come about? Why do we do this? What is so special about this? So there's a lot of storytelling around these things that I hope would be interesting for the general public. Or when it comes to the idea of considering swim training programs as a form of programming language, because that's what it really is. When you write down the instructions, it is just like writing a computer program. And the basic ideas of programming are simple, like loop, like repeat things. That's a very simple concept. So that is something I think that's pretty universal. And so I'm disheartened that you tell me that it's too cerebral, or do you think it's too hard? I'm not sure. Tell me, what was your experience?
Listen, I went to I haven't taken math since high school, and I went to school for something completely unscientific. So I get a little intimidated when I see a whole lot of numbers and things that aren't letters on a page. However, you're also proposing a completely different language for swimmers, a written language. And again, I am someone who is very set in my ways in that regard. in terms of what I'm used to seeing on a whiteboard, right? But I think it's fascinating, the idea of, hey, we can do this better. We just have to relearn some things, right? And which I love the idea of. I love the concept just generally of, just because we've done it this way doesn't mean that's how we should do it. And I think that's one of the main ideas that you're trying to battle with this book, is that, hey, we might be able to do some swim training, swim writing, swim language in a better way.
Yeah, so there are different levels here of the language. So when your coach writes it down and writes it what we call a markup language. So it's a formal language of writing a program that is then understandable by humans and by computers. That is great. But of course, that is not something that's suitable for something to read at the pool. Because at the pool, you got goggles on, that might be foggy. There's all kind of other issues. You're at a distance where the whiteboard is quite far away. So visibility is something, I mean, you could take, like, print it out and take it with you and put it on the pool right on the edge. That's possible, but then you've got a problem of water, so you need to laminate the paper. So there's a couple of difficulties there that we have. But the representation that, of course, the swimmer sees needs to be as simple as possible and does not show any of the math. It is just a very structured, very consistent way of displaying swimming training information. So that's what the swimmer sees. The coach sees it in the more formal way. And then the computer, of course, that's the great thing. The computer can see it and understand it. So we are right now using a language called English. Fantastic. But of course, every language has ambiguities in it. Like a word might sound the same, but has different meanings. There's all kind of ambiguities really in communication. And then if you ever tried going to a different city, go to a different swim club, join their session and try to understand what they're doing. And not just, let's say, I mean, last year we went to the Netherlands and we swam with a swimming club in Eindhoven, and it was fantastic. But of course, there was a language barrier, so I had to dig out my Dutch again and try to remember what all that means. But also, they had expressions in there and patterns that I was just not familiar with, that I didn't know. So we have to kind of retrain and do these things. And I had conversations with coaches, and they said, like, well, actually, this is my magic sauce. I don't want to share this. This is my way I do it, and I'm successful, and I want to keep it to myself. But that's not really how science progresses. So science progresses by sharing knowledge and by being able to communicate about it. So if you find out that a certain training method is successful, then you want to be able to tell people about it and tell people precisely what you've done and what effect it had. That is the necessity of science. And if you cannot do that, then, well, it's very difficult to progress as a community. So, yeah, we need a shared language that is precise and is non-ambiguous, so that we know what to do and so we can establish what kind of effect it has. Like, if I do this kind of program, well, maybe then this is the result I had in terms of my performance. So again, that's talking about the high performance level, where this will become increasingly important. I mean, yes, what you observed might be true, that science, to get a competitive edge, you have to become more systematic. You might have to become more scientific about how you train, and that's where it becomes more important.
So the language piece, I think you've covered wonderfully. Tell me a little bit about the changes in training that this book proposes, or just the patterns, the swim training patterns that you've developed here or are proposing.
Sure. Well, again, the patterns I put in here, they are not proven to be the magic cure to make you swim faster, right? The patterns are there to make swimming more interesting, particularly make it more interesting for your mind. But then again, once you've got a formal language established, you can use it to express anything. So once you can speak English, you can say anything you want, right? So let's say an easy example of something that people might be familiar with is, I don't know, I've got the book here, so maybe I'll just pick an example. Okay, let's take pi, right? People might be familiar with pi. They might remember it has something to do with a circle. And of course, I've got pages and pages of pi, and I've got a recipe of how you can swim the digits of pi. Is that interesting? Well, for somebody like a geek like me, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's kind of interesting. But then there are also ideas in this book about, well, how do you calculate pi, and what is actually a meaningful precision that you need? So precision is something interesting. Like, do you use Microsoft Excel?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you might be shocked to know that Excel doesn't actually know pi. It knows or should I say, an approximation of pi. That's all it knows, because the digits of pi, when we're getting into calculating pi, it's a national endeavor, and it's really, really hard thing to do. And there's a reason why it's a hard thing to do. It's like, ultimately, this number is unknown. It is unknowable because we can never know it precisely, because we always have to calculate the digits. It's unpredictable. It's an absolutely fascinating number there is. So there's a really big history and ideas about why pi is interesting. And so then the question is, like, if we got this fascinating idea that exists in math, such as pi, how can we put that into swim training and let you swim pi? So, and here's the program. Here's the program of how you can swim pi.
Okay.
So again, that's a very easy example. But I'm going to also, so let's say you do a repetition, right? Let's say you swim, let's say 225s, 425s, 625s, and then your coach puts on 725s. Does that upset you?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a pattern, like 2, 4, 6. Well, next one must be 8, right? So that is a pattern. And we can describe this pattern in mathematical terms, right? And I'm not sure how it is in your environment, but in my club, people get pretty upset when there's a 7, when the pattern's broken and it's not very well received. So maybe it's a more general thing about swimmers, I'm not sure. But yeah, we like patterns. And of course, to some degree, it makes it easier. Like, you can just remember the pattern instead of remembering the actual numbers, and that kind of makes it's easier to keep track of things. But still, if you swim a program and it ends at 2,950 meters, are you going to put in the extra 50?
Me personally, no, but other people would.
Yeah,
I absolutely see the point.
We like round numbers, right? So there's a pattern there that we prefer. So we prefer 3,000 rather than 2,950. Why? There's no reason for it. It's just something that is in us, that we like certain patterns, like round numbers, or that, it's not just a random set of numbers that we swim. There's actually a meaning behind it. There's a pattern behind it. And so we like these patterns, and coaches get quite creative in coming up with these patterns. So, and here's just more of those ideas of crazy patterns you can swim.
I love it. And I love that you're taking something that, again, to swimming, I think is pretty sacred. I think to many people's swimming experiences, patterns are essential. And certainly for me, that was something I followed endlessly, right? Is just, I want to see the pattern. I want the pattern to continue. I want it to break evenly. And you're presenting all kinds of weird patterns where you might not necessarily think, oh, this is a pattern I can see or understand or think of, but you're taking something weird and you're saying this is a pattern, and now you can train in this way.
And again, there's so many ideas about patterns that people might not be familiar with, and I'm trying to really make it as much understandable as possible, and sometimes surprising. So of course, you might remember what a prime number is. So let's swim prime numbers. Why not? Right? So there's all kind of number sequences that we can do that are interesting. And I try to explain where they come from, what do they do, how do we calculate them, and what is so special about them, so that you got some sort of background. So it's not just, again, a sequence of numbers that don't mean anything. It's about meaning and being able to think about it. And of course, this is the thing. It's like, if you spend all these hours and hours and hours having something to think about, like trying to work through, okay, if this is the pattern, what will be the next occurrence? Like, so if we take this example, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, cool. that kind of makes sense, right? But if you got other patterns, so what if I would say 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8? What is the next number?
I have no idea.
Well, of course, I put you on the spot here. Barely anybody would know unless you know a bit about it. But this is the Fibonacci sequence. So it's a sequence of numbers. So you always take the previous numbers and add it to the current one. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. So there's a very simple. Once you know the pattern, it is super easy, right? And then you can know what is the next one I'm supposed to swim. And these are kind of patterns that I hope are interesting.
Yeah. No, it's viewing patterns through a completely new lens, or at least new to me, and I think new to many other swimmers as well, who maybe aren't as acquainted with science or mathematics. So in the process of writing this book, again, you have problems and you're searching for solutions. Do you feel like you had standout takeaways, or things that maybe surprised you as you went through this process of authoring this piece?
Well, a standard thing that is always troubling, but like people like me who do math or science, is that the real world is really complex and surprising. So if you want to formalize something that is not founded in physical reality, like swim training is something we make up, right? It's just something that humans invented, and we come up with drills. Like, why do we certain drills? How many are there? Whenever you try to formalize that, you understand how weird humans are and how complex we are. So it sounds so simple, but once you get into it, the complexity explodes in terms of, well, what do we exactly mean when we say a repetition like this? What does I? And so once you start to be, the usually complexity explodes, and trying to capture that in a way was surprisingly difficult or had, and sometimes when we try to make this work. But that's a bit more general problem. Humans are weird and wonderful and complex, and whenever you try to formalize them, it gets difficult. Other things I've learned, well, it's just an absolute enjoyable process. I had the privilege. I wrote this book while I was on a sabbatical, and I was able to dedicate, a good proportion of my work life to this project. And that's something I just thoroughly enjoyed. Being able to focus on one thing for a time, not 100 things at the same time, it's fantastic. And I just love writing books, focusing and really putting together a meaningful unit of knowledge that hopefully will be able to be interesting for other people, is something that is just enjoyable. So I try to share my passion for this idea. So as you said, you yourself might not have had, let's say, a mathematical or science background in your previous education, but still, I would like to share this passion that I have for the stories and the ideas that humanity has come up with over the centuries, and how weird and wonderful these things are. Like, who would have thought that swimming could be related to pine cones? What's the relationship between pine cones and swimming or math? And there is. That's the surprising thing. And also the limitations that we have, like certain mathematical ideas, we're still struggling with, and we don't know the answers to, and there are complexities around it which are mind-boggling. And so I'm deeply passionate about it, and it's always my ambition to be able to communicate them in a way that makes it accessible for others to understand, and so that they see a glimpse or an interest in what the world is up to, and how we, in the world of ideas, are trying to progress.
Okay, I'll bite. How are swimming and pine cones related?
Okay. Good. All right, just a second. All right. Pine cone. I actually bought several bags full of pine cones. You see that pine cones have a pattern of growing. This is a very good representation. And this pattern is based on a concept called the golden ratio. it's a very specific way of how these things grow. And the maths behind it is exactly what we talked about before. It's the Fibonacci sequence, the 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so forth. It's the same pattern. So they grow in the same way as this number sequence progresses. So yes, and we find this in sunflower seeds. We find that in pineapples. Unfortunately, there's a lot of BS around it as well. So a lot of people try to put the golden ratio onto anything, which is just not true. So I'm not demystifying a little bit, sort of like making sure that, there is just not everything's being claimed is true. It's true. It's a pattern that has come out of math, but then has moved over a lot into art. So the argument is like, if you make an art piece that uses the golden ratio, it's supposed to be perceived as being more beautiful. Maybe that's true, maybe not. The scientific evidence is pretty weak on this.
Sure.
But a lot of people claim it. I mean, the amount of Facebook memes you get where people put a spiral on pretty much anything and claim, oh, look, golden ratio. That one has to be a bit careful about it. And again, I hope that this educates people a bit and tells people what this really is and what we know is true and what is not. The math, as well as this representations in nature, as well as representations in our culture.
Mm-hmm. So have these principles or these patterns you have written about, and just again the process of writing a book and kind of doing that sort of research as well as introspection, has that changed your personal swimming?
Yeah. So look, I train regularly with a club, and we've got a coach who puts the program on the wall. Fantastic. I love that. But I also do a lot of extra swimming where I don't have that privilege. I either swim with myself or some others. And every day I have to ask myself, okay, what am I going to swim today? And it's easy to fall back into kind of like, you always do the same thing, and it gets really, really, really boring. And so getting inspiration and having ideas about what to do today in the pool, this is where this is really helpful. So I can just say, okay, today I'm going to swim the Fibonacci sequence, because why not? It is something to do. And well, some of my swim buddies, some of them are math teachers, and they can actually appreciate some of it, of some of this craziness. Others are just happy to tell them what's next. So there's a mixed amount of response to that. But again, every day you go to the pool, you have to ask yourself, what am I going to swim today? And you need some ideas on what to do just to keep it interesting. And to keep yourself motivated, because if it's not interesting, you maybe have some willpower, you can force yourself to do it, but that's not the idea. Ideally, you should go into the water and enjoy it and be engaged in it. And for that, we need something interesting to swim.
Well, Christoph, thank you so much for coming and for telling us about this new publication, Swim Trading Patterns. Again, this book is it available now, or is it about to be available?
That's a good question. So I've got here, there's going to be a limited edition. This is the cover that I'm currently designing for it, but that's what the cover roughly will look like. Is it available? Officially published, yes, but the publisher currently has got some distribution problems. So if you order the book right now, I don't think you're going to have it on your table tomorrow. But you can pre-order it right now, so it is available, and one chapter of it will also be available open access, so that's going to be available as well. And I have a YouTube channel where I actually show people how to use this technology from a technical perspective. So if you want to get some ideas about how to do it and what kind of tools do you need to do it, then there's plenty of material around you. And please get engaged. If you want to send me a program that you swim, I'll turn this into a swimming markup language for you, and you can have a look on how that works for you.
You've been listening to the Swim Swam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take Swim Swam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.